Target has everything you need for Easter fun on your next Target run, like basket building and brunching faves, decor, and candy galore. It's festive fun for everyone. Easter, easy as Target.
Moms, at Vanguard, you're more than just a parent. You're the heart of the family. You're the first responder to any need. You can be the hero and the villain, sometimes on the same day, because you know that in the end, your legacy is the values you instill in them. At Vanguard, you're more than just an investor. You're an owner, because the future you're building is bigger than yourself. Discover the value of ownership at Vanguard.com. Fund shareholders own the funds that own Vanguard. Vanguard Marketing Corporation Distributor.
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host Mason. Today's Throwback Thursday episode is going back to 2018, talking to Alex Martin. This was not hosted by me. I think I took over the show like right after this episode aired. I think this might have been the last episode done by Kurt. But I did edit this episode, and that was one of my first, so hopefully it's sounds okay. But anyway, Alex was 18 years old when he did this trip, 1,750 miles around the edge of Lake Winnipeg. It sounds incredible. Sounds absolutely incredible. I love the thought of doing something like that. I've done stuff like this before on very small lakes, compared to this, day trips. And I also love when people of this age do trips. I did a lot of my big trips at a pretty young age, early 20s, so a little older than Alex here. Probably the age Alex is now, because this was almost 4 years ago, I'm sorry. And gosh, I love it. He didn't have an idea for what he wanted to do after school and decided to do this. And I remember when I graduated college, I didn't have a plan either. I didn't have internships or a job or anything. All I wanted to do was bike tour. And so I spent the next I planned on the next 6 months being out on the road, on and off road, doing different routes across the country, and visiting like 30 national parks. And honestly, for not having a plan, I think I landed pretty well. Took some time, definitely took a lot more time than my peers, but I think I landed on my feet. And after hosting this show a while, led to some other things. Now, if you don't know, I work at Athletic Brewing, non-alcoholic craft beer. I was there in the very early days, which was an opportunity that came about from the podcast. And crazy enough, today we were selected. It was announced that we were selected as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential companies in the world. Isn't that crazy? And that came from this podcast, just knowing Bill, who is the owner and founder of Athletic Brewing, was a fan of the show and reached out one day, and we connected. But just goes to show you don't have to know everything. That's what adventure is all about, is seeing what's around the corner, seeing what's around the next bend, what's in that cove. Can I paddle into that cove? There were many times Alex encountered, what's that over there kind of mentality. So you maybe you don't have a plan either out there. I know I'm ranting at this point, but I don't know. Just love this story. It's been a great day. Obviously, big deal for Athletic Brewing, and just contemplating today just how you get here, how you get to where you're going, and do you even know where you're going half the time? And frankly, I don't. So, but what I do know is this is a great story. So let's go ahead and jump in.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I have Alex Martin with us today, and Alex did the coolest thing this summer. I should kick this off by saying that he's 18 years old, just not been 18 for all that long, and he circumnavigated solo, first person to do this, Lake Winnipeg. And I think it's the coolest thing. He's a great guy, and I can't wait to hear about this trip and how he got going doing this. So, Alex, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's so cool what you did. And when I heard that you were going to do it, I think I first heard about this while you were either on the water or hadn't started yet. I think maybe you were on the water. But regardless, it sounds like it went off without a hitch. Is that right?
Yeah, it was awesome.
So cool. Well, I can't wait to dive into the details of this. So we're going to be talking about what the people call it Southern Canada. I still think of it as pretty far north, the northern reaches of this continent. So we're going to be talking about what Lake Winnipeg is like, what it's like to grow up in that area. We're going to be talking about kayaking and what it's like to do that big of a trip and a lot of things like that. So let's kick this off, I guess, Alex. You say you grew up in the city of Winnipeg, right?
Yeah. I grew up in the city of Winnipeg, as well as an area located on the eastern side of the South Basin of Lake Winnipeg.
So Lake Winnipeg, you said, is like an hour or something like that away?
Yeah, about an hour's drive.
Okay, and believe it or not, I did see Lake Winnipeg, just barely, when I was a year younger than you are now. So I drove up there with a buddy in my 1968 Volkswagen. So I can claim that I've at least seen it, but I have no memory of it really. So you're going to have to fill us in. What is Lake Winnipeg like?
Yeah, Lake Winnipeg, a lot of people haven't experienced it very much, even from Manitobans. People, if they have been to Lake Winnipeg, people tend to go to the South Basin. The lake's split into two basins, the north and the south. The north is a lot more remote. There are many communities located on the North Basin's shorelines, predominantly First Nations communities. And it is a lot larger, and it's known for having bad weather. And then the South Basin's the South Basin's smaller. It's what people mainly think of as cottage country. So you have a lot of very nice beaches that many Winnipeggers travel up to on the weekends and stuff like that. And that's mainly what people think of as Lake Winnipeg, especially when it comes to Winnipeggers. They think of, getting to sit down on the nice beach. You go when it's nice out. You go when it's sunny and there's no wind. So the lake is calm, and that's what people tend to go for recreation. Whereas myself, I like to push it and go on those windy days, whether it's windsurfing or kayaking, and really get into the big swells that Lake Winnipeg gets in the storm season.
And there are a lot of islands in this lake as well. You have a feel for how many?
There's a lot on the eastern shoreline. The South Basin doesn't have too many. I would major islands. It's not like Lake Superior. So my father grew up on Lake Superior, and there's a lot of islands out there, and they're all named, right? And people will travel out to one island for lunch, or you'll take your canoe out and go island hopping. But the South Basin, there's a few massive islands that are home to recreational communities, such as Hecla Island. There's Deer Island, Bear Island. There's some in the North Basin that are very populated, like Matheson Island. And then you get more remote islands like George Island, which ends up being sailing destinations for keel boats. And then there's a lot of very small islands on the East Shore that, to me, when I was paddling through them, it was very much like experiences I've had on the East Coast, and as well as some of the Great Lakes. I'd guess there'd be about maybe 30 major islands, very big to the very, very small islands. There'd be hundreds of small rocky islands on the east side.
Wow. Well, I have Wikipedia open because I wanted to be able to speak somewhat intelligently about this lake. It says that it's a relatively shallow lake, which I guess it averages about 40 feet deep, something like that.
Yep.
And which is kind of interesting. That means that if the wind gets hauling, you probably have some huge swells with that
huge swells.
Lake.
Yeah, and they're very, very they're known to be very difficult to paddle in. There is a saying that I'm not sure if it's Manitobans inflating their ego or not, but the saying is if you can kayak or windsurf or sail Lake Winnipeg, you can kayak or windsurf or sail anywhere. And people usually fill in their own sports into whatever category that is. It is, because it's very shallow, there's also many issues with timing for waves. So when you go and surf on the ocean, for example, You're given the period between the waves. I haven't been surfing on the ocean in a long time, maybe like 4 seconds or something like that. Lake Winnipeg, you really get no break in between them. So one of the major issues for it's a lot of fun for surfing or windsurfing because it is a challenge. But when you're in a kayak that's 18 feet long, if you have large swells and you're surfing one wave, you end up surfing 4 or 5 waves because they end up being so close together that you have very little trough and a period that's under 1 second or 2 seconds.
Oh, that's crazy. That's something I would not have known nor thought of. So it means it's probably a little bit more chaotic. I mean, when it gets rolling, it's really rolling.
Yeah, and it's gained a lot of infamy for some of the ships that it's taken down. There has been a lot of major shipwrecks on that lake. I can't remember the name of the ships for the life of me, but there used to be very, very large passenger ships that would go around the lake. Not so much around as up and down, coming out of Winnipeg and traveling onto the lake. And there are ships that were known to be taken down by islands because not everything is well marked. Some of the maps aren't very accurate, but if people are interested in actually seeing videos of some of the waves on the lake, there's a research vessel based out of a community on Lake Winnipeg and the community is called Gimli, but the ship is called the Nemeo, and it's run by a research group, and they have a video on YouTube, and I don't know whose channel it's on, but it's a large ocean faring vessel, and you can see it just crashing through waves, and the waves are coming right up over top of their boat.
Oh goodness.
I've heard of sailors who, admittedly, people are very, very bad at guessing the height of waves, but I had one sailor who told me that they were up into 20-foot waves. I'm not sure what the largest recorded is on the lake, but the North Basin, when it gets howling winds, there's winds that are in excess of 100 kilometers an hour in some of the bigger storms, and that's like that pushes waves way up. So
yeah, wow. This could have gone very wrong if you were there at the wrong time. It sounds like the weather must have been a little bit more gentle for you.
Yeah, the weather was awesome. The weather tends to shift kind of late August. So I was up there working construction over the past few weeks, and that was there was wind every day and large waves. But just like some of the Great Lakes, the Great Lakes tend to start to get a little bit rough come fall, and so July and June are good times to be on Lake Winnipeg for kayaking. And I did get into a few big storms in the North Basin, but yeah, I did really luck out with my trip. There has been one, well, not one. There's many people who get stuck and windbound on the lake while paddling what's supposed to be 3 or 4 days. And one story I heard in a community up north was that there was a guy who was paddling for, I think it was supposed to be something like a week on the lake, and he got windbound and ended up staying something like a month and a half and went through all of his food supplies that were supposed to take him well beyond Lake Winnipeg and the rest of his route. And he ended up just getting windbound, couldn't move in his canoe. He was there in October with big wind and big waves. But yeah, I did really luck out.
Wow. So just a few more bullet points about this lake so people kind of get the scale of it. I'm glancing through this. First of all, I guess we should say how big it is. It is, 24,500 square kilometers, 9,465 square miles. That's a big lake. This is big. And it is Canada's 6th largest freshwater lake, the 3rd largest freshwater lake that's entirely contained within Canada. Here's something I found really interesting. Its drainage, meaning the area that, water goes into the lake and then continues on out, its drainage is 40 times larger than its surface. It says that that's a ratio bigger than any other large lake in the world, and that leads to just a crazy amount of water coming out of the lake. I couldn't believe this when I saw this. 2,000 cubic meters per second flow out of the lake. Did you know that?
I've kayaked that. It's the Nelson River. It's a lot of people asked if I went and visited a community up north, and I'd actually done that in the year prior, so 2017, and we were eating lunch and floating in the boats, and like you're just clipping down the shoreline. It moves very, very quickly. And when you pass by that river mouth at the top of the North Basin, I was told in one of the communities, oh, like you should be a kilometer offshore because you'll feel it pull. And I thought, oh, that's kind of silly. I think a kilometer is really pushing it. I'll just be like well offshore. And it was probably around 750 meters, and my stern actually, I could feel it start to get dragged back.
Oh no!
So there's two exits for the Nelson River. The main Nelson that flows past a small fishing outpost called Warren Landing, and then one that was put in, I believe, by the Hydro Development Project, which is called 2 Mile Channel. And 2 Mile Channel has a lot more, like it's a substantial flow, and you'll see if there's algae on the water, you'll actually see it pushing in towards 2 Mile Channel. So like it's a substantial flow rate. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, that's just nuts. I mean, you think about it in feet per second, cubic feet per second. For the people in the English system, it's almost 73,000 cubic feet per second. That's massive. So give us a human feel for the scale of this lake. We can read these numbers and they kind of rattle around in our head and we go, okay, it's big. We get it. But what's the perception of it? How big is big to you?
There are many moments on my trip where looking out, you get the feel that you're looking out at an ocean. You don't see land anywhere, and it's one thing to stand on a lake and not see any shoreline on the other side, but to go days on end where all you see is straight shoreline on the left side of your kayak and everywhere else around you is water. It's to some degree quite lonely. It's also, to me, it's fun. I took pictures and sent out a lot of photos when I was able to, and people are surprised and they say, like, oh, like I would hate doing that. That looks terrible. But to me, and I'm sure all of your listeners, it's like that's what we chase after. And so like I love that feeling of like where it's you with the wilderness and there's just you're alone out there. I love that feeling.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, but people that enjoy it, I think they can really resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's very, very hard to change the mindset that like if you're worried about being alone out there, if you start off lonely on the trip, it doesn't get much better. And I started in the South Basin, so I was paddling by cottage country a lot, and it was kind of a nice warm up into it, because there are portions where if it's, I always say that the best days for me mentality wise was the hard days, because you're goal focused, you're looking to get to the next campsite and you're dealing with waves and wind. But it's those flat days where there's nothing going on, where it's just flat water, and those are the days that are really challenging, because all you can do is just paddle. And there's nothing there to look at except like straight shoreline of sand beach. And that's when it kind of gets lonely, when you have nothing else to do and your mind starts to drift.
Yeah, I can imagine. So when you get to the North Basin, I mean, that's the larger body of water, but it's also more remote. How does the landscape change? What does it look like up there?
A lot of the landscape up there changes to rock. And so it's also what I got a lot of messages for, because people taking photos up there, people don't normally see some of those things. So there's there's big limestone cliff walls, cliff walls that, like I can be paddling next to them. And again, it's hard to measure things from a kayak, but you can look at trees along the shoreline. Those cliff walls are easily 2 or 3 stories high, and they'll stretch for kilometers. And so it's a lot of people think it's all just sand beach, but once you get up north, you have rocky shorelines where you can't land a kayak, especially in waves, and cliff walls that offer absolutely no security. Like you just have to keep pressing that out. And then marshlands, you get into a lot more marshes. The islands were actually a great turning point for me, because when the islands started, it was kind of my home stretch south. And so making that run through the islands, you go from a large open body of water to suddenly being enclosed in those rocky islands. And that's really something. I really like the diversity of all of that.
Mm. So did you do the route clockwise? Is that the way to this?
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. You know, on the show, we talk a lot about the adventure, but it's honestly the time between the adventure that is most important, being adventure ready, as we say. And the most important aspect of that is knowing your body and knowing what's going on inside your body. And the most important company that can help you do that is Inside Tracker, literally tracking what's going on inside your body. Inside Tracker analyzes your body's data and provides you with a clear picture of what exactly is going on so that you can make changes to your diet or see what's working, what isn't. And how they do it is they analyze all the data from your blood, DNA, lifestyle, and fitness trackers to help you optimize your body and know what's really going on. So if you'd like to learn more or get 25% off the entire Inside Tracker store, go to insidetracker.com/adventure sports. That is insidetracker.com/adventure sports. Inside Tracker can get you ready and keep you ready for all your favorite adventure sports. If you're in need of some high quality professional live streaming capabilities for work or hobbies or whatever, check out Melon. Yes, like the fruit, Melon. Melon allows you to stream right in your browser. You don't have to download anything. Your guests don't have to. It's super easy to sign up. Takes like 15 seconds to get signed up. And it comes with a ton of different tools. Allows you to live stream across tons of different platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all at the same exact time. So you don't have to pick and choose if you're hosting a webinar or doing anything like that. You can literally live stream to all those places. There's a single chat that people can all comment on the same place. You can accept donations. It saves to the cloud. High quality camera capabilities. Like it's awesome. So if you feel like you have a need for live streaming and have some pretty serious customer support to go along with it, go to melonapp.com/ASP. And that's melonapp.com/ASP to get started for free today.
Target has everything you need for Easter fun on your next Target run, like basket building and brunching faves, decor, and candy galore. It's festive fun for everyone. Easter, easy as Target.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
Yeah, so I started a community called Grand Beach, which is about a day's paddle from the very bottom of the South Basin. It's located on the east side. So I went down to the very bottom of the South Basin, north on the west side, and then over top on the North Basin, and then south on the east.
Very cool. So I am also looking at Google Maps right now so I can see some of what you're talking about. And I was just in that North Basin looking at the cliff faces with lots of little rocky islands and hundreds of little rocky islands you'd have to navigate through. And I was just thinking, well, are those rocky islands, those little ones, did that give you a place where you could land and camp? Or were they actually more of a nuisance because it was stuff you had to avoid?
The major nuisance of those islands it's a low water year this year, and I've heard that it's 3.5 feet lower than in previous years. Other people have said 2.5 feet, so I'll call it 3.5 feet because that sounds more dramatic. But there's islands that are on that shoreline that aren't put on the map, whether it's because low water year, so these reefs have become rocky shoals, or because the islands just aren't well mapped. And so in some degree it was difficult because they're very hard to navigate through. And I've done a lot of navigation in other areas, in other water bodies where the islands are a blessing because they're really easy to know where you are by looking at the map. But the inaccuracy of the island sometimes meant that I was figuring out where I was based on the average speed I can move in my kayak, and then figuring out how many hours I've been paddling for.
Okay. So, dead reckoning.
Yeah, I should say that's totally unreliable. Like I did have I had a Garmin InReach, which is a satellite device, and it allowed me to communicate with people, but also showed my location. And there were days where, to be honest, there were many days where I really didn't care where I was, because as long as I'm not at the finishing point, I know I'm not moving backwards. And so I just keep paddling, and then, at the end of the day, check where I made it to so that I can compare it to where I think I am on the map. And you're always within like 2 or 3 kilometers. To answer the original question, like they were a blessing to some degree because they offered protection in big winds. On the other hand, they became a nuisance because it is very difficult to navigate them.
Wow. Do you have a mileage total? How far did you paddle?
1,672 kilometers.
Wow, 1,672 kilometers.
Probably give or take 15K easily. But it's the shoreline. Interestingly, no one can agree on the shoreline distance. If you check a government website versus, I think, Wikipedia and like the Canadian federal government's website, it varies between 1,800 kilometers and 1,700 kilometers and 1,750. But once I had it all mapped out, it was just under 1,700.
So you're just pretty darn close to 1,000 miles. That's kind of where it translates to. That's a long way in a lake. One lake. That's pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. So I got to kind of get back to the backstory here. We kind of have a feel for the size of this, but why did you decide to do it? I mean, here you are. You decided to do this before you were even 18 years old. What inspired you?
Well, a few things. One, it was to raise awareness for water stewardship. The lake is known now for being, I think, damaged is a good way to put it. There's 2 main issues right now. One is zebra mussels, an invasive species that attaches to boats, and that's one major concern. They're washing up on beaches now in the millions, and they cut people's feet, which is, in my mind, a smaller concern. But they are also clogging pipes, destroying docks, attaching to hulls. Like they terribly affect the ecosystem. And then another is the algae, and algae blooms are very significant on Lake Winnipeg. They have been for a while, but there is one specific type of algae called blue-green algae, and that is toxic. It smells terrible. We just had another bloom in the South Basin, and I mean, you can be driving 2 or 3 kilometers away from the lake on the highway and still get a whiff of. It smells kind of like a rotting plant. And so they're like the lake. That's kind of like the background of the lake's issues. But so I wanted to raise awareness for water stewardship, specifically targeting people who are in high schools and elementary schools, because I think that, although there's been a great deal of work done with promoting conservation for both Lake Winnipeg and its watershed, the target audience tends to be people who are significantly older. Might be it all gears towards tax-paying citizens and people who vote about like which politicians are going to favor Lake Winnipeg in the next election, and who you can phone as a tax-paying citizen, and what this will mean for the future of your taxes or the value of your land. But it doesn't really target someone in grade 4, right? Right. Because why would a grade 4 care about they're raising tax prices to help save the lake? That might be something that they can understand because they hear their parents talking about it, but it's not something that's very specific to them. And so my hope was that by doing these presentations, that people would then see it as, like, here's someone else was previously under the age of 18, and look what he's doing. To a lot of the takeaway that the students had wasn't so much about, I have to be careful to drain my boat of zebra mussels. It was more, I took what I loved, which is kayaking, and used it to bring around a message. And that's what they really liked about it. It helped promote kind of Lake Winnipeg as an outdoors hub. And hopefully, like one of my fears is that in my lifetime, Lake Winnipeg will die as a tourism hub. It is a great outdoors lake. It's a great kiteboarding lake. It's known for its kiteboarding, its windsurfing, its sailing. It's not well known for its kayaking, really, but kayaking, canoeing on the lake, fishing is well known. And so in order to just encourage that future of recreation on the lake, as well as the trip was just tons of fun. It's something I've wanted to do for a few years. And so it was kind of a bucket list item too.
Neat. There's a lot there. So the blue-green algae blooms that are happening, is that naturally occurring? Is it an effect of something going on like nitrates getting dumped into the lake, or what's causing that? Do you know?
Eutrophication. So it's a lot of phosphorus in the lake. And so it's going to call out my home city here of Winnipeg. And it's in the news more and more now that we have a treatment plant in Winnipeg. And I can't speak too scientifically on it. There's people who are a lot more capable of doing that than myself. But last I heard, it was 4 times the amount of phosphorus coming out of that plant than is the current standard. But the issue is that it's going to cost a huge amount of money to fix that. And so it's like one of the things that people are working towards is targeting taxpayers and saying, here's something that you need to consider for the future, that we do need to repair this treatment plant and get this underway. That's kind of like how it's causing and what's one of the things it's coming from. But there's also tests being done, whether it's by that research vessel. They're one of the groups doing research, as well as a group called Lake Winnipeg Foundation, who I partnered with for my trip. And they're sending out people with test sample kits and going around the province and testing different sources on the watershed of Lake Winnipeg to see whether there's high levels of phosphorus, or they're doing a lot of chemical testing around the province. It's kind of a volunteer type of thing where people are collecting these test samples and going around the province, and that's been great because they're collecting a lot of samples, a lot of evidence, and that's being used in the future for and currently for scientific research. And it's also that vessel that I mentioned earlier, the one with the big waves on YouTube. They collect information on where certain chemicals and certain, like phosphorus, for example. Phosphorus is a really big thing on Lake Winnipeg right now. What water body that's coming out of, because as you mentioned, there's one very, very large exit for water on the lake, the Nelson River, but there's many, many rivers that flow into the lake, rivers, creeks, streams, and it's identifying which ones are contributing the most towards basically pollution on the lake. Whether it's in the form of microplastics or the blue-green algae, untreated wastewater. And it's been found that the Red River is a source of that. And the Red River flows right through Winnipeg. It's where that water treatment plant is, or the waste treatment plant. And so that's something that's been identified. And now it's taking it to the next step politically and saying, okay, how do we turn this into a political standing where in the future of provincial municipal politics, this can be used as a platform and encourage people to vote based on fixing this North Water Treatment Plant.
I'm going to speak beyond my knowledge. I'm telling everyone right now, but there have been studies done around Colorado that say the oil and gas industry is worth so many, dollars per year to the Colorado economy. And then they look at tourism, and tourism dwarfs the economic impact of the oil and gas industry. And so what people are saying is, why are we looking at a short-term damage to the land that will hurt our long-term biggest economic impact, which would be tourism? And I don't even know if those numbers are fabricated. That's why I say I'm speaking beyond my knowledge. But I bring that up as an example. it's really easy for people to come up with all sorts of numbers and facts and figures to try to promote their cause. But it might be that the long-term benefits of tourism on the lake outweigh the cost of repairing this waste treatment plant and others, to the point that it's just a no-brainer if we just look a little farther down the timetable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and one of the things I should mention too, price point, which I just looked up, it's estimated over $1 billion to repair that North End sewer treatment plant. $1 billion for a municipal government where Winnipeg is.
That's big.
Yeah, like that's a lot of money.
That's big.
And so encouraging people to what would probably inevitably be a large tax increase. And I mean, again, I'm just a kayaker. I'm not political scientist or in any way involved with government stuff. But that is a large bill to foot. And so I think encouraging people that don't give up on Lake Winnipeg, and that Lake Winnipeg is still part of this province, is something that could hopefully encourage people to consider footing that bill and creating a new wastewater treatment plant, or just simply making the upgrades to bring it up to what is now considered the current standard.
Yeah, well, with numbers like that, and I'm not going to dive into the politics of this, but it really needs to be viewed as a national treasure, right?
Yeah,
so it's not a municipal problem anymore. This is a national problem.
For sure, and it's if I remember correctly from the presentations, it's been a few months since I've done one of those, but it's Lake Winnipeg's watershed is just massive. It's 1 million square kilometers, and then home to, I believe, 7 million people, and it covers 4 provinces and 4 states. So it's a very, very large watershed for this lake. And I mean, even if we start with small things, 7 million people, that's a large community that can definitely, we can start to see real solutions.
I love it. Well, let's dive into the trip itself, man. We have danced around this, but we got to hear the stories. How many days did it take?
I started June 27th and finished August 3rd. And then this is where it gets complicated. It was 27 paddling days, 28 days if you include one day that was down for weather. But of course, if you're doing the math along, that's not equal to June 27th to August 3rd. So I did spend a large amount of time in communities up north, researching stories, taking pictures and taking videos and doing interviews. That's all being forwarded to the organizations that I partnered with, as well as being used in the future for our presentations.
Cool. So as an 18-year-old, how did this impact your perception of this part of the world and perception of humanity itself?
Well, first off, I graduated high school at the end of June. This trip was kind of my endpoint of high school. And so I'd grad on this big grad dance, kind of like prom, on the Monday, and I left on a Wednesday early in the morning. And so I had one day to trade a suit jacket to a paddling jacket and get out on the water. Everyone's geared towards university or college or trades and getting a job. Meanwhile, I was planning on abandoning life for 2 months and kayaking around a lake. And so it was, for one, it was a thrill, and it was something that I've been doing every summer. I've been doing big trips every summer, and it was now making it have a larger purpose, as well as one of the greatest things I found was just the hospitality everywhere around the lake. We tell our kids stranger danger. And meanwhile, I was spending nights with people that I've never met before, and they'd see me on the beach and say like, "Oh, I know you. We saw you on the news. Come in, have a bite to eat and a place to stay." And they'd put a mattress out on the floor for me, and I'd sleep in someone's living room, someone I've never met before, which probably isn't a great idea in retrospect, but it was fantastic, especially when you go from being in a tent for a few weeks, and there wasn't too much rain, but your gear gets wet, your gear gets smelly, and so having a chance to not sleep in a sleeping bag is just fantastic. And so the hospitality, the South Basin is mainly cottage country, and that was almost all of that where I stayed, where it was with people that I had previously planned to stay with, friends of the family and stuff like that. Once I started getting further north, I had previously in January of 2018, so like months before I had left on my trip, I had contacted all the First Nations communities on Lake Winnipeg and asked permission to come onto the land and meet with people. And they were super generous. They offered me a bunch of information about the lakes surrounding their communities. Everyone was very welcoming, gave me a place to stay. And I would show up in these communities and, I wouldn't know a single person there. And, within a few minutes, I'd have people come by who recognized me because they had heard a few months ago that, there's some crazy guy kayaking around the lake and, he's coming over to see us. And so the people I'd never met before offering me places to stay, food to eat. The best moment for me was I'd arrived on a shoreline and it was one of those rough days where the weather was terrible. The wind and waves weren't too bad, but it was just pouring rain. And I was thinking, wow, I'd hate to set up a tent in this. And I arrived in a community, Jackhead First Nation, and they said, oh yeah, no, don't set up your tent yet. We'll find you a place to stay. We'll get you food to eat. And they were super, super generous. Same there's a First Nations community called Mississippiwistic in the North Shore of the North Basin. And I'd arrived at the nursing station because there's a nice green grassy area that I'd planned on setting up a tent. And someone came by and said, hey, don't camp here. You have a place to stay at my house. Never met him before in my life. And then he took 3 days to tour me around, found other people that I could talk to, find out stories and stuff like that. And drove to just all sorts of places around the community and around the North Basin there. And that was just incredible. So I think the hospitality that people offer it's something incredible.
Statistically, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly, but you hear numbers like 90% of the people in the world are just really great people, who care for their fellow human and that sort of thing. There's somewhere around 10% that might be a little bit more nefarious, and there's 1% that you kind of have to watch out for. But what that tells us is that, even that 10% that may not always be on the up and up are generally going to treat you right. And so we're talking about 99% of humanity that can be reasonably trusted, and we forget that, we were taught as kids that the world can be a dangerous place, but the reality is that it's almost all safe. It's mostly safe. It's really just that 1% you got to watch out for. And I love it when I hear from people like you who go out and say, wow, I met this perfect stranger. And next thing you know, I'm sleeping in his house. He takes 3 days off. He shows me around. I met all these people. It was amazing. That's the story about humanity that I like to hear. I think it's just pretty cool. So did it change your perception then of people? Do you think the world is a safer place now?
Yeah, I still probably wouldn't just sleep at anyone's house in Winnipeg. I think that'd be a bit of a reach, but there's something called northern hospitality, and that's a term that's I think sometimes it tends to be thrown around a lot without very much concentration of the meaning behind it. But you get into northern communities and everyone looks out for each other. Another one of my favorite stories was there's a small harbor in a section between the South Basin and the North Basin that's called the Narrows. And I'd arrived there in a kayak and, of course I'd arrived there in the kayak, but kayaked up there and there's a harbor there and there's 2 boats left in the harbor as the end of fishing season. It had closed on July 10th, I think, or something like that. And so I arrived, no boats around. There's no community around it either. It's just a harbor where people park their boats and they drive to wherever they live. And, there's a sign that says, no camping violator. Anyone who violates this will be prosecuted or something like that. And, the number to contact if you're landing a boat there. And it was about maybe around 8 o'clock at night. And those phone numbers are all after 5:30. No one's picking up those phones. And so I pitched a tent in the grassy area and thought, middle of nowhere, I assumed that anyone who would come by would have a little bit of heartwarming decency and let me stay there. So I packed up, went to bed, flipped the kayak over in the bushes, sitting in my tent, and I hear a truck come up, and I could hear someone say, "Well, would you look at that?" And I thought, "Uh-oh, that's probably the harbor master coming to give me a rough time for camping." And so got out of the tent, walked up, and these two people sitting in a truck looking at me, and the guy looks at me and goes, "Where are you headed?" And I said Grand Beach, which must have looked really strange because I was about 450 kilometers away from there. And the guy's eyes kind of like widen up, and his wife goes, "Well, where are you headed to tomorrow?" And I said Matheson Island, which is the big populated island in the North Basin. And they said, "Oh, well, like, there's bad weather tomorrow. We wish you the best of luck." I said, "Thank you very much." Went back into the tent. Around maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, I wake up to these high beams pointed into my tent. My gut reaction was like, "Oh, this isn't going to be good." And so I got changed, got out of the tent, and the same couple's back there, and the guy goes, didn't want to shake the tent to wake you and think that there was a bear, so we thought we'd shine light in. And he goes, "We brought you food." And I said, "Food for what?" And they go, "Well, there's the storm coming in tomorrow, and if you don't make it to Matheson, we want to make sure that you have enough food." Meanwhile, I had a week of extra food left in the kayak, and so I told them that. We had a good laugh over that. But they had brought me fresh cooked apple pie, apple juice, and orange juice because they weren't sure which one I would like. They also brought me a can of, I think it was Pepsi, 2 bags of chips, and then fresh fruit. And so I had a laugh with them and said, like, "Oh, that's very generous, but I don't need it." And the wife's response was, "Neither do we." And so we ended up eating an apple pie in the back of their truck at 10 at night, really just the middle of nowhere. And so like that hospitality, like they had never met me before. And after maybe a 30-second conversation, they cooked me an apple pie and brought it over. And that was really something. That was just one of the best moments I've ever had.
That's wonderful. I love stories like that, man. That's a beautiful thing. That's so cool.
And I actually, interestingly, I met their cousins on my way back because you have to pass through the Narrows again when you finish the North Basin, and it's about maybe a mile across from either side. And I ran into, just by chance, their cousins who were fishing there, and they brought their boat over to my kayak and said, "Hey, we think we know you." And I said, "Well," they go, "Okay, where do you know me from?" They said, "Our cousins saw you at the harbor and they brought you food. Our whole community's been following along. We didn't think you were going to make it. We're really happy you made it this far." And so, like they'd shared on Facebook that I saw the Facebook post. They said something like, we saw this guy who thinks he's going to kayak around the lake. He seems like he's well prepared. And it'd been reshared so many times, and people were commenting on it. And so, if people didn't recognize me off of what I look like, they'd recognize me off of this picture of a kayak on the couple's Facebook page. That's just an 18-foot blue kayak with a bunch of stickers on it, and that's how people knew me. So.
That's fun. That's fantastic. Here's a cool thing about it too. You realize that you did something, and some people would say, "Well, why'd you do that? That's just some stunt." But I don't see it that way. You do something for a life experience, and you decide to make it meaningful, maybe to raise awareness about, water preservation. And pretty soon there's this momentum that builds behind it, and people discover what you're doing, and, it creates a wave in the consciousness of society. A wave that can make a difference, that can crash on someone's shore, and you don't know who that's going to be. You might change a life. You might change an attitude. You might provide hope for a lot of people just because you shared your story. So why not do it? I think that's one of the most beautiful things about adventure sports, that it often goes overlooked. By doing some of these things, you can actually make far-reaching impacts in places you would never anticipate. So that's really cool. You got a little buzz going around your trip, and people are watching what you're up to, and that's just fantastic.
Yeah, I've just the beauty behind this trip was that strangely for some people it seemed to mean a lot of people it meant just as much to them as it did to me, and then strangely some people it meant more to them than I ever set out to have it mean for me. And like I have different reasons for loving having done this trip. Meanwhile, like there's people who everyone finds their own connection to this trip, whether it's watching me pass through the community that they're originally from, or where their grandfather used to be a commercial fisher, or where their grandmother used to have a trapping line, and that's their big takeaway from it. And I think it's just unique to find people's different perspectives on what beauty in the outdoors means to them.
Yeah, that's great. And so what about the natural impact? You spent a lot of time. Let me ask this question first. What was the longest period of time that you were alone, that you didn't see other people?
Well over a week. I just got to think this back in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think 12 days.
12 days. So that's a pretty good stretch. That gives you plenty of time to get into the rhythm of nature and to have that experience. What was it like? What is that solitude like? What was nature like in that area, and how did that impact you?
I've often said that I was on this radio show before I left, and I'd opened it up to people to send me emails and contact me with comments, questions, concerns. There was a lot of people who were like whether they made it public or not were definitely going to be rather dubious of this, because this is like a rather dangerous undertaking, especially when people equate my age to, well, I have an 18-year-old son named Jason and he plays video games in his living room and he wouldn't survive this, so he won't survive this either. And a lot of people would make those type of comments on a public forum that, it's not appropriate for me to respond to. So my hope was that people would send me emails with concerns and stuff like that, and I could hopefully answer that so that they wouldn't go through the whole summer with the thought that this is a dangerous undertaking where the guy's going to die. And so I'd opened it up, and one of the emails I got was, "This lake doesn't care if you're alive or dead. Don't
Wow.
do it," or something like that. Yeah, it was like very dramatic. And so, my response to that is like, if it doesn't care if you're alive or dead, that doesn't mean that it's out to kill you. You kind of get this mindset when you're out on the trip that the lake watches out for you to some regard. I think there's many people have a very deep spiritual connections to that lake, and I think you talk to a lot of people and they'll all agree that if you're out there for a good reason, the lake does really watch out for you and your best interests. So,
Interesting. So you had a real strong connection with the lake and with the land then.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I guess I am humored. I think it's funny when people say, "Oh, he's only 18, he shouldn't do this." But there's no reason not to if you're prepared.
Well, what am I going to do? Do it when I'm 30 and have a full-time job? Who's going to? I highly doubt I'm going to find an employer who goes, "Oh yeah, sure, take 2 months off to kayak around a lake." So this was the best time to do it for me. So
I love it. Well, and another question I had to ask was, what about your folks? What'd your parents say?
I've admitted this before, so I think I can admit this now. I started planning this in September. My mom found out about it in November, and then my dad found out about it when we were all on a family vacation in Costa Rica. At a moment that I thought, like, wow, he seems like he could slowly adjust to this concept. And so I think I told him it would be end of December, early January, and so it was a lot of the foundation was already there for the trip. A lot of the planning had already been done, and I let him know, and I told him about it around the dining room table. And I think his first response was something like, my parents were anticipating this because I've been talking about this for the past few years. But I think my parents also thought that this was going to be something that, like, it's one of those things that you keep thinking would be a great idea, but you never really commit to it. But, after they settled into the idea that this was something I really wanted to do, they were incredibly supportive. I think a lot of parents, and I think it's true now more than ever, as their child's success grows in a sport, so does their apparent knowledge in it. So you'll talk to someone who has a kid who plays hockey, and, the parents never played before, but suddenly they're a professional coach. And my parents have real gift of not doing that. They do know that, like, you know, like they fall back on what I kind of believe. And so, you know, like I don't have, I've very much been gifted with having parents that allow me to make my own decisions, trust my knowledge on stuff. And as well, like when I chose, I was stuck between two kayaks. I didn't know which one I was going to take for this. I wanted to get a new boat for the trip, and I was stuck between the Rockpool Terran and the P&H Cetus MV. And I was just torn. I could not decide for the life of me. And my dad sat down and he phoned different ambassadors for the two companies who use these kayaks, and he looked through all the reviews online, and he looked at you know, not just reviews from the common consumer, but also from engineers and stuff like that about the durability and reliability and how it goes through the water and how it's going to be once it's packed. And so he helped me make that final decision to go for the Cetus. And like they're my parents, I consider them a gift to being able to do what I've done in my life.
That's beautiful. Well, I would like to say for those who are listening who maybe they are parents, if you teach your children well, teach them how to be independent and make wise decisions, and then you empower them to make those decisions, then, you know, kids get to this point of being able to do amazing things at what some people might say is a relatively young age. It's just the way it works. But if you always tell your kid, no, you can't, no, I got to take care of you, no, don't do that, you'll get hurt, you know, then the kids never learn it, you know. So your parents certainly must have worked hard to make sure that you were the kind of guy that was empowered to make decisions and try things, and that they were there to catch you if you fell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they. I should also say that they're also very outdoorsy. Like this wasn't just like my parents haven't sat around inside of a house their whole lives. When I was super young, we were climbing Mount Assiniboine and Mount Robson. I did the West Coast Trail with my dad when I was 10, and you know, like my dad when I think I was in grade 2 or grade 3, he was looking at traveling to Antarctica. My parents have both done big kayaking trips in Alaska. My mom's very big into canoeing. And so like this wasn't a totally new concept for them. Like it wasn't, I wasn't throwing them into the outdoors world, which has been great, because I think if not for my parents helping me or inspiring me through my whole life with getting outdoors, this wouldn't have been a thing. But they're also open to new ideas, which is nice. Not just this trip, but both my parents have gotten into whitewater kayaking after I got into kayaking. But like, you know, they're not running class 4 rapids. They're not trying to go down to the States to run waterfalls and stuff like that. They're happy to pat me on the back after I go and run waterfalls, but they're not. They're open to trying things and open to new ideas, and that's what's really helped me grow in the outdoors world.
Very, very cool. Well, we're running out of time, darn it. I'd love to keep on talking to you more and more about this. How about this? Close us out with something that surprised you about the trip, something you didn't expect to happen that was impactful for you.
Sure. I think one of the best things was being able to work with companies and organizations. It's going to sound like a massive sponsor pitch, and it's not meant to, but you know, like organizations like I worked with 3 organizations on the trip: Lake Winnipeg Foundation, Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, their Manitoba chapter, as well as what's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site called Pimatuanaki in the North Basin of Lake Winnipeg. And you know, when I contacted those organizations, I was 17, and it was with kind of what wasn't really a concrete trip yet, because I had all my maps planned out. I knew where I was staying, but I asked them to be a part of this ride, and they were more than willing. And it is a dangerous trip, and their willingness to be part of it, and also to see the value in having this educational opportunity with having a 17-year-old present to other high schoolers about this trip, as well as I worked with 4 companies that sponsored me. A company called Gear Lab Paddles, which is based out of Taiwan, Gorp Bars, which is this energy bar based out of Manitoba, so a local company, Wilderness Supply out of Winnipeg, and Wind Paddle Sales out of the U.S. And all four of those companies, I reached out to them. I've done a lot of trips, but nothing that's been, I guess, profitable is the good word. Nothing that a company can go like, wow, look at this. And so they all those companies put a lot of trust in me. Gear Lab's been incredible, and it's a company out of Taiwan that I reached out to them 17 years old and said, I love paddling Greenland paddles. I know that you guys make a strong carbon fiber option. Is there any chance you would sponsor my trip? And I was expecting a response of, yeah, we'll take $20 off or something like that. And the response I got back was, sure, how would you like to be a brand ambassador for Gear Lab?
Nice.
And they wrote a bunch of press releases and stuff like that, and they got the word out. And that's one of the things that's important to me about this trip. It's not about being a commercial aspect. This wasn't meant to be I didn't want my face on the cover of something. I wanted it to be about Lake Winnipeg, and all these companies respected that. And, Gear Lab drove to have my articles published and stuff like that. And the amount of people that reached is just incredible. And it takes it outside of the Canadian border and makes it an international event. Same with Gorp. They also wrote stuff on their blog and stuff like that. And the amount of backing that I had from these companies and organizations, the amount of trust that they gave me for a 17-year-old that I've done big trips before, but this is something that's totally new. And this was a trip that there was no guarantee whether or not I would finish it. And they put their trust in me. And I thought that was just incredible.
I love it. That's very, very cool. Well, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time today to come and tell us at the Adventure Sports Podcast about your trip and what you did. It's inspiring. I think that people realize, there are things that are out there that are possible. If I dream a little bigger, maybe those things could happen. So thanks for doing it. Thanks for inspiring us. And thank you for the time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, you bet, man. And for all the listeners out there, wow, right? Battling around Lake Winnipeg. I just think it's a fantastic feat. And I want to congratulate Alex for doing it. But, let that be a seed for a dream of your own and send those waves out yourself. You never know what shores those waves will crash on and what a difference it might make in the lives of another. So until the next show, make sure that you do get out there and have some fun.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
Grandparents, at Vanguard, you're more than just a grandparent. You're the family historians. You fill your closets with heirlooms, family photos, and letters from long ago. You're always planning the next family reunion, even at the reunion. Because for you, time well spent is time spent on them. At Vanguard, you're more than just an investor. You're an owner. Because the future you're building is bigger than yourself. Discover the value of ownership at Vanguard.com. Fund shareholders own the funds that own Vanguard. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor.
Only at Metro by T-Mobile, you can upgrade to 5G and get more. More choices with the largest selection of free 5G phones, like the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, and more 5G coverage on the T-Mobile network. Only at Metro. Most affordable versus major prepaid brands with eligible port ID and plan plus tax. 5G not available in some areas. If congested, users greater than 35 gigabytes per month may notice reduced speeds, and Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus T-Mobile due to prioritization video at 480p.